Today I want to talk to you about the game which is called The Last of Us. Now this is a PS3 exclusive and it is one of the best games I have ever played without a shadow of a doubt. Now this is going to be an in-depth full review about all aspects of the game, including single player and multiplayer. And when I say full review, I literally mean I will talk about every little thing I possibly can. So this is an in-depth review, and if you guys have played the game or you know about it, you know how great it is, and you know that there is literally a lot to talk about. So right off the bat, I just want to say that this game has one of the best story modes I have ever played. It is fully immersive in the sense that you follow the characters through their journey and you listen to their story and you see how they have developed as people and find out a little bit about their history and see those little interactions within themselves, you know, between characters, which is also just absolutely brilliant. The voice acting is actually on point. It's very, very good. It's something that a lot of people would miss and take for granted because it's just there and you don't notice it as much. But the voice acting is very true. It's very truthful. It comes from the heart and it's very realistic as well. I love that element to it. Another thing that I would have to mention is weaponry. There is a bunch of weapons and they all fire differently, they all feel different, they all have different advantages and disadvantages, which makes the weapon unique and which makes it different. And also the sound quality is great in all aspects of the game, not just the weaponry, but we'll stick to weaponry for now. The weapons, when you fire it, you hear a gunshot, you hear that a weapon has been fired. It doesn't sound like you're shooting a little pea shooter or a little potato gun or BB gun in a tin can. No, it sounds like an actual weapon and it makes you shit yourself. so that's great. And yeah, that brings me on to the next point, which is the sound quality overall, such as the clickers, the noise they make is terrifying. I don't know what it is about that little clicking noise, you know, that dolphins make or whatever, but it's kind of an adapted form which makes it sound very aggressive and threatening. But when you hear that noise, you duck and you go into cover ASAP. So I love the sound quality of that. Another point would be the environments and the scenery and the setting. The Last of Us is one of the most beautiful games I've ever seen. It is visually stunning and it looks amazing. It is one of the most aesthetically pleasing games out there. And it literally is one of the best looking games. The colours are very bright, but they can also be very grungy and dark and dinky and stuff like that. So it's very rotten, but it also has that contrast of the lush greenery and the trees and foliage and grass and bushes and stuff like that. So that contrast is very, very hard to, you know, get a balance between, but they've done it correctly and they've nailed it. Another point I would need to mention is the progression of the story. I know a lot of people wouldn't consider this to be a main thing, but I love the way the game progresses because it moves from one scene to the next, but it's very free-flowing. It's not like a traditional form of gaming. It's not like start, stop. You know, you start at one point, you go through it, and you finish at the end. It has this transitional period, like a cinematic, which is, again, very beautiful looking, but also makes sense. And it's not like Metro Last Light, where you are placed in these transitional periods where you go through history and see what your memories unfold, and it takes you out of that fully immersive nature. No, with this game, with The Last of Us, is fully immersive even through the cinematics, which is absolutely brilliant. It explains how the story is progressing, it explains where the story is going to, you know, where it's going and how it's going to get there, but it also explains why it happened. So I think it's done very well. And one of the main points that I would have to mention is all the minor details, you know, the little things. It's the little things that matter in life. That saying is very true and it applies to this game as well. For example, when you holster a weapon, you sling it onto your shoulder. It's very realistic, that animation. You know, all the animations are very, very good. And I love the realism aspect of this game in terms of those animations and those little things. For example, you can go to a workbench and you can craft a second holster for your weapon, for example, a long weapon. And what happens is that you can have access to two long weapons, such as a bow and a shotgun, without having to bring down your backpack, which is, by the way, also another great animation to access your backpack and stuff. But you don't need to bring that down to switch weapons. You can just press left on the D-pad and switch easily. But what that does when you create a second holster is that it shows the second weapon on your character's shoulder, on Joel's back. So that's very realistic because when you create a second holster, it would be visible and you can see it on your character. So I love the realistic aspects to those animations as well. Another thing about the little animations is that they're so cleverly done. For example, when you're hurt and you need to bandage yourself, you don't just pop a pill or something like that, or you just magically press up on the D-pad and you've used the health pack. No, you just sit there and in real time, you know, in game time, you wrap a bandage around your arm or your leg or your torso or whatever. So it's actually, I love the fact that it has to take up actual time in game to do something like that, which also includes, you know, going to your backpack and getting something out. In most games you could just click a button, go to a drop down menu which usually pauses the game, and you could select it at your leisure. But in this game you have to be aware of your surroundings at all times, which means that going into your backpack and getting something out would be very risky, which can be very risky, and so you need to do it. You need to use it wisely. And this is also another minor point that people may have missed, but when you walk under drain pipes that are leaking and there's like water rushing down, your character automatically raises an arm and puts it above his face to stop the water from hitting him in the head or the face, which is, you know, a very nice touch. Like I said, those little things are what matter, and it's those little things that make the game unique in what it is today. And other things include, for example, when you throw a Molotov and it burns the ground and somebody walks over it, like a, you know, an infected or a human player, you know, an enemy, and their feet are on fire and you can see their feet burning and how the AI react to it. That's also a very, very nice touch. Now that leads me on to the next point, which is AI. Now the AI system, there's good points and bad points, which I'll get into both, but starting off with the good points, the AI are very, very vigilant when it comes to detecting you, the player. So when you make a move, a false move, the AI see you, but not only do they see you, but the AI react to the dynamics of the game in real time. So for example, if you're walking and you knock over a chair, or you knock into some pots and pans and they make noise, the AI will hear that and they'll come investigate. So it's not like you only make noise when you throw a glass bottle intentionally. You can unintentionally make noise and attract attention to yourself, which is again very, very realistic, and I love that realism element to the game. And there's a second part to this, which is, for example, if you use a wooden bat or a glass bottle to smash someone's face in, and an enemy AI is nearby, they will hear that and come investigate as well. Even if they don't know what's going on, they will hear that noise and they'll come investigate if they're close enough, which again adds to the realism and fully immersive nature of the game. But one negative thing I do have to say about the AI is the friendly AI, and how, like for example, when Tess or Ellie or another character such as Bill follow you into an area, they run around, make lots of noise, especially Bill. I don't know if you've noticed, but he has got the loudest footsteps ever. The guy literally stomps around. But the thing is, when they do things like that, they don't attract attention to themselves. They can make as much noise as they want, and the AI will just ignore them for some reason. But you make a slight, tiny little noise, and the enemy are on you like a cheap suit, okay? Which kind of ruins the fully immersive nature of the game, and it's kind of annoying, especially when you can blatantly see not only is your friendlies running in front of the enemy AI, but they're pushing them out the way to get through a doorway, for example, and the enemy don't react. They do absolutely nothing, and that's kind of annoying and a bit frustrating, and kind of ruins the game in that fully immersive element. But on the plus side, the enemy AI, like I said, are very vigilant, and they're very dynamic as well themselves. Not only do they react to the dynamics of the environment, for example, you making noise or doing stuff to attract attention to yourself, but they also react dynamically to what you do. For example, if you run behind cover, they will try to find a flanking route to your left or to your right and try to circle you, which is actually very realistic, and that is what would happen normally. So I love that element to it. But when in terms of the friendlies, it's actually it's lacking. The enemy AI do not react to them. And another point is the friendlies, they kind of push you out the way and get in your way a lot. And because there is no clipping in the game, you can't go through them, so you have to go around them. So they push you out the way, and there have been countless of occasions where I've been trying to grab someone from behind or try to reach an area or grab something, and my friendly AIs have just pushed me out the way and, you know, made me get caught or seen or spotted, or, you know, they may have given me a close call because of that, or it's just generally just frustrating and annoying. So that's one issue that I wish was addressed. And one more point about the friendly AI system is that they kind of react in a stupid way sometimes. They just go out of character and do silly things. For example, Tess will not switch off her flashlight even when I have mine switched off and we're trying to hide from hunters or, you know, runners or something, you know, the enemies that can see you. Because, you know, if there's clickers, it doesn't matter, they can have their light switched on. But when the enemies can see you, you need to have that flashlight switched off. So that's a bit annoying. And also Bill, I'm sure you guys have played with him as well. I'm sure you guys have come across him as well. He not only does he stomp around, like I said earlier, but he uses his shotgun and fires off shots randomly when the enemies aren't even attacking. I mean, okay, if we're being attacked, he uses his shotgun, that's fine. But we're in sneaking mode, and he still uses the shotgun for some reason, and he attracts loads of attention to us unnecessarily. So that was a bit annoying, and I wish that was something that was fine-tuned and fixed, because it's not a huge problem, it just needs a fine tweak. While we're talking about negatives, there is one other point, and that is animations. Now, like I said, the animations that are in the game are great, and I love them, but from what we saw at previous reveals and trailers and gameplay demos, they, Naughty Dog, the producers and developers of the game or whatever, they have reduced the number of animations, so there's less animations in the game now than what they were before, which is kind of annoying, and I wish there was a few more animations to go along with the actual gestures and movements, but there isn't, which is a shame. Going on from that, another point would be the lack of animations. They could have added in a few more extra. For example, when you're in a fight, it becomes very repetitive to grab someone's head and smash it into a locker, or just elbow him in the throat and then knee him in the face, or when you have someone from behind and you can choke them, or sometimes you spin them around and knee them in the face, or push them to the floor and stomp on their head. Okay, that's all great, and the animations look beautiful, they're lovely, realistic, and they're absolutely brilliantly done, but it can get a little bit repetitive, and what I would expect would be, depending on where the enemy is located, their position towards you, how far you are from them, if you are running or not, what kind of environment they're in, what kind of equipment or stuff you're carrying, what kind of objects they're nearby, and where your friendlies are. I would expect some sort of dynamic animation that would adjust to that environment at that time. So I guess that might have been a bit difficult to make on the current consoles, so I hope in the next game, if they do make a second one, a sequel, they would implement those animations which are a bit more dynamic and more realistic, because it kind of gets repetitive after a while, and it's it kind of is unrealistic, because if there's a locker, you don't always smash someone's face into it. Sometimes you can get the locker door, for example, and smash it into their face instead, or something else, something a bit different, a bit based on dynamic elements. So that is what I would have liked to have seen. But overall, I would have to say that the single player is one of the best things I have ever come across in my entire life, and just a few tweaks are needed here and there, and it will make the game literally 100% the best thing it could possibly be. And for me, it literally is game of the year, because it is a wonderful game with many elements that are embedded within it, and it's just absolutely beautiful. Not only the actual gameplay mechanics and the gameplay itself, but the fully immersive nature that it provides us with, and the realism that it brings along with it. So all in all, I think it's a beautiful game, and I love it to bits. Now onto the multiplayer. The multiplayer I haven't played as much because it's just not that good, I'm afraid, but that's to be expected, because when you have a game such as this, The Last of Us is geared pretty much solely on the single player and the campaign and story mode, and because that is done so well, I believe that they haven't been able to spend as much time as they possibly can on the multiplayer, which is expected, because when the single player turns out to be this great, you can't complain about multiplayer because it's not something most people are interested in. But I feel as though maybe they shouldn't have implemented a multiplayer and kept it all entirely single player, and maybe worked on more DLC for single player, or maybe extended single player a bit more and spent more time on it. I feel as though maybe those tweaks that I talked about might have been addressed before the game was released. So that's maybe a little bit of the downside. But again, multiplayer is still good and it's playable and it's actually got nice features in it. But overall, the multiplayer is nowhere near as good as the single player. And in my opinion, it actually brings the game down, because it makes me feel as though it has no place in the game. It's not done extremely well or to the standard of the single player, so it feels like it's out of place for me. But all in all, I think it's a great game. It's wonderful, it's magnificent, it's fully immersive, it's stunning, it's great looking, it's beautiful. The gameplay mechanics, the game engine, the fully immersive nature, the realism, all of that adds to the game and makes it literally, like I said, one of the best games I've ever played. And my rating for it would be 9.5 out of 10. I would give it a 10 out of 10, but like I said, it just needs that little bit of a tweak to give it that 10 out of 10 feeling, and maybe the removal of multiplayer, or on the flip side, maybe making the multiplayer a lot better to match the single player quality and standard. Then that would make the game literally 100%. That's pretty much my review. So let me know what you think in the comment section below if you've played the game. For all those people who haven't bought the game and are thinking of getting it, I suggest you do. It's well worth the money. But anyways guys, that's pretty much it. Thank you all for tuning in. This is Sniper474 and I'm out.